Sure. So the biggest thing that in my experience, that I realized is that there's no resource that can actually teach you everything. It's pretty much just getting your hands dirty and diving in the deep end and figuring it out along the way. Oftentimes, because this is still on the forefront of research in academia, most resources are unfortunately academic papers and journals and articles in that side of things, which can have a lot of jargon, which is daunting to the newcomer, daunting to someone who's not been in the field already. And so what I realized over the course of my master's and my undergrad was ignore the jargon and just kind of keep reading and keep understanding, try to understand the underlying logic behind the different implementations. And then over time, your knowledge base of the jargon will be building up. So that's basically how I did it, was essentially just diving in the deep end, starting with the project, and obviously having someone who can advise you and guide you along the decision processes of the project, and maybe help explain the jargon to you at some point in time. So for a newcomer, it's not really easy to just dive in, but slowly working your way through the whole process and trying to get your hands dirty is the best piece of advice that I can give.
So it's all so very new and there are so many opportunities. So the industry academia sort of interlinking is obviously pretty apparent. So I know you have transitioned to industry now. So how is the process for you in terms of applying for jobs, and what's the outcome been so far?
So a lot of this kind of also did stem from my research experience, because a huge chunk of my project was a collaboration with Toyota. We worked with them. We had bi-weekly update meetings with them, and they helped us through a lot of decision processes as to what is required in the industry at the time. And so a lot of what we worked on was based off of that. And my master's was focused on intelligent systems, robotics, and controls. All of this is just basically fancy words for a software side of robotics, in computer vision or machine learning or deep learning, and other such things. So my research effectively was focused on object detection for autonomous driving. And the motivation behind this research was effectively how can we detect objects in bad weather conditions, things like rainy weather, snowy weather, foggy weather. Sensors like cameras and radars, they aren't the most effective because of the optical vision. And so we kind of want to still be able to detect these objects in these bad weather conditions. So other sensors like radars aren't affected by these bad weather conditions, and which is what I kind of focused on and worked on in my thesis for my master's degree. And so during my master's, I was working with Toyota. They were one of the sponsors for the research project at the time. And I would have these bi-weekly meetings with them, and they would give us a lot of the specifications and requirements in industry, which we would use to base our research and project on. And so basically what that essentially taught me is that academia is one side of things where you can get you have a lot of freedom to work on things, but a lot of these requirements you can only understand when you are in industry, which is kind of why I wanted to head into industry and actually work on these projects, to get a firsthand experience from what the requirements are, what the users need, what the customers need. And so for the last couple of months, or this last quarter, I kind of focused on the whole job application process, going through the interview processes, applying to different companies and things like that, which in and of itself is a whole full-time job, in addition to your classes and research and what have you. So it was a grueling process. It was a fun process. And yeah, that's a little bit about me and what I've been up to the last few months.
Great. So typically, we all hear of the automobile industries in terms of cars, but obviously it's a huge sort of industry to be in. Could be sort of a lot more to do with trucks, or it could be heavy earth-moving equipments. There's so many other, or even trains and aircrafts and all of that. So what is it that what are the opportunities in the industry beyond the the commonplace Tesla and others that we all hear of?
I think the beautiful thing about robotics is that it is becoming an extremely ubiquitous term now associated with pretty much any company you can think of. Not just autonomous driving, but even manufacturing processes like welding. They have a lot of robotics associated with them. What I mean specifically is that a lot of these skills in manufacturing require a huge amount of time to learn and understand how they actually work, which is not always available to the common man. And as a result, robotics is an easy solution. I shouldn't say easy, but is a solution to this problem where you can basically send a robot in to accomplish a task autonomously.
The big companies, big tech companies, and even others are throwing in the hat to understand all kinds of new technologies, including augmented reality, virtual reality, use of computer vision, things that you've already mentioned in our podcast earlier. What's your view of what the traditional tech companies are working on, and what's the startup world thinking?
I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but pretty much any company that has any kind of technology in its backend requires some form of computer vision, machine learning, or deep learning or another. The big companies that pretty much everyone knows and associates with this are companies like Apple, Facebook, Amazon, Google, to some extent even Netflix. And all of these companies kind of have different aspects of computer vision. So for example, Apple is doing a lot of computer vision in the augmented reality space, the virtual reality space, as well as processing of the images that we take from our phones. And there is a lot of rumored projects like the autonomous driving project at Apple. Obviously, it's all behind the doors, it's hush hush, so no one really knows what's going on there. But other companies like Facebook and Google have been pretty public about a lot of their endeavors. So Facebook with their metaverse and their VR headsets that they're trying to build with the rebranding from Facebook to Meta, and Google with their subsidiaries like DeepMind, which do a lot of this, is definitely on the forefront of technology as well. Even Microsoft with their new hardwares like the Duo or the Surface Book, they do a lot of computer vision in either face recognition or photography, things like that. Obviously, outside of these big companies, there are smaller companies like Lytix, Rivian, Do Simple. These are all automobile industry companies, which has been my experience throughout my industry. But also you have other companies like Path Robotics, which are doing welding. Path is like the only company that does automated welding, and they build robots that do this, which is really cool. And so obviously, if you look in or do any kind of Google search, you'll find a ton of companies that do some kind of robotics or computer vision or another. And so definitely having some programming experience in this field is beneficial no matter what you end up doing in your industry or in your career down the road.